You may very well be the smartest person in the room, but it doesn't mean you're the only smart person in the room. Brilliance can come from anywhere. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. And in this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I consider to be a unique life experience. And you can read the details about that in the bio or in the notes. But just know, I'm an inner city kid who ascended to the C-suite of a Fortune 100 company. So I've seen a few things along the way. And it's my intent to share stories and hopefully some life and career lessons that will help you on your journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. So, general format, I'll share some thoughts on recent items in the news. Then I'll have a deeper discussion on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with a fun American history fact. Okay? As I've mentioned many times, I don't usually discuss politics or sports, mainly because you can find that just about anywhere. And I also rarely go on a rant. But I have to say something about the recent, quote, controversy involving the American Eagle brand jeans advertising and Sydney Sweeney. Okay, first, I can't believe this has become such a big deal. I mean, I saw the ads and I just thought it was a clever, memorable campaign for the jeans. Now, as a marketer, I did somewhat question the overt sex appeal tone, as American jeans, I think, historically have been targeted toward women, and you usually utilize sexy women to appeal to men, not women. But that's the only thing I really saw worth mentioning. And then the next thing I know, this has exploded into a right versus left brouhaha, with one side saying the ads have undertones of white supremacy and Nazi propaganda, and the other one saying liberals hate hot women. Really? Really? This is our national discussion? On my personal social media page, I posted, there's way too much going on in the world for me to get caught up in a jean advertising controversy. But as I watched the story unfold, I realized it was something revealing about the current mindset in this country. We're on edge. The slightest spark of controversy can quickly explode into a media inferno. Do I think American Eagle intentionally tried to appeal to white supremacists' target and mindset? No, because I don't think they're that clever and I don't think they're that stupid. Jeans are one of the most mass appealing product categories in the country. Nearly everyone owns a pair, and 90% of Americans say they wear jeans at least occasionally. The percentage of Americans who identify as white supremacists is a low number. And it clearly doesn't include any minorities, as they represent nearly 50% of the country's population. So why would a mass brand choose to advertise to such a small target market? Do I think they knew it might be controversial? Probably. But controversy gains interest and builds awareness. But I doubt they thought it would receive as much attention as it has. America. Every incident is not a cultural war. Every situation does not have to be a right versus left debate. Advertisers have been using sex to sell product for decades. Now, you see a lot less of it now because of political correctness, But clearly, American Eagle decided to go there. But as a country, we have to learn to just let some things go. Otherwise, this Chicken Little syndrome will exhaust the public and potentially lessen engagement when there really is a controversy worth discussing. This isn't the one. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today, I want to talk about arrogance and how this one personality trait can derail an otherwise promising career. In some previous episodes, I've talked about the importance of having self-confidence when trying to achieve career success. And a key reason for this is, in most instances, you have to take some risk in order to attain greatness. And to be a risk taker, you have to believe you're right, even when others do not. So not only do you have to have the confidence to take the risk, but you need to be willing and able to recover if you are indeed wrong. Self-confidence is critical. That said, there's a significant difference between being self-confident and being arrogant. And you need to have a clear understanding of the difference because the outcomes and implications to you vary greatly depending on whether you are arrogant or not. Over the course of my career, through success and setbacks, I developed a set of workplace principles by which I would behave, communicate, manage, lead. And whenever I started a new position or role, I would share actual printed copies of these principles with my team for a couple of key reasons. First, it greatly shortened the time period for them to learn me and figure out how to work with me. I would tell them, look, I know who I am and how I am. So rather than leaving it to you to figure it out over time, I'll just tell you up front. The second reason is it clarified my values and priorities, which would help them self-govern and increase the likelihood we would work together better and more efficiently. Lastly, these principles are universal and can be applied far more broadly than just working with one individual. They're good rules to live by in most work situations. So a couple of different teams that I worked with came up with the same label for these principles. They called them Marvinisms. And to this day, I still receive calls, emails, texts from previous team members letting me know that the Marvinisms still apply and are helping them with their career. Well, here is one of my all-time favorites. You may very well be the smartest person in the room, but it doesn't mean you're the only smart person in the room. Brilliance can come from anywhere. Let me repeat that one. You may very well be the smartest person in the room, but it doesn't mean you're the only smart person in the room. Self-confident and secure leaders don't have a need to dominate the conversation in a meeting. In fact, some of the best leaders often say the least in a meeting because they want to encourage others to speak and contribute. Self-confident leaders only speak when they have something to say. And this also builds a culture of participation, which often results in better solutions. Okay, so if this is how self-confident people conduct themselves, how do arrogant people differ? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, arrogant behavior is easy to spot. Here are some common characteristics of an arrogant person. Dominating the conversation in meetings and constantly interrupting others when they are speaking. They might be quiet, but they're not listening. They're just waiting for the next opportunity to talk. Arrogant leaders dismiss others' ideas without any consideration. They put people down, and they often brag about their past achievements. They take credit for team accomplishments. And these last two are really critical. They never accept blame, and they're never wrong. Now, some of you may be thinking, this sounds an awful lot like narcissism, but there's a clear distinction. Narcissism is a true personality disorder characterized by a deep-seated need for admiration, and there's also a lack of empathy. Arrogance is more of a personality trait, but they're still capable of empathy and having genuine relationships. So basically, all narcissists are arrogant, but not all arrogant people are narcissists. Okay, let's move on. The key question of this discussion is, how does arrogance actually hurt your career? Well, in a few ways. First, people don't want to work with you or for you. Arrogance leads to alienation, and it's hard to be successful if no one is supporting you. Second, no one wants to help you or look out for you. You know, work can be a brutal, competitive, and sometimes cutthroat place. And it helps to have people concerned about your well-being and letting you know of potential pitfalls or conflicts that you yourself may not see. People don't go out of their way to help arrogant people. I once had a boss who was brilliant and on a fast career track, but he was universally seen as arrogant, and a lot of people didn't like him. Now, I actually had a great relationship with him, so I gave him some constructive feedback. I just told him, you have no margin for error. So far, you've always been right when it mattered, but no one's happy for you. And while I'm not saying there are people who will push you down, but if you ever fall, no one's going to rush to help you up. So you might want to soften your approach and focus on being a little less of a jerk. You can still make your point, but try slipping a sock over the sledgehammer, and that way you're a little less abrasive. You know, he actually appreciated and embraced the feedback and went on to have a very successful career, even reaching CEO status. Now, we've all had to deal with arrogant people. Unfortunately for me, it was in my very last corporate position that I encountered the most arrogant leader I had met in my entire career. I held the position of Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer for ServiceMaster, which was based in Memphis, Tennessee. I reported directly to the CEO, Lawrence. And at that time, ServiceMaster was a holding and operating company for 3 separate lines of business: Terminix, American Home Shield, and the Franchise Service Group, which consisted of 7 franchise brands, including ServiceMaster Restore and MaryMates. So I had a centralized team that provided strategy, marketing, and sales support to each of the business units. So I'd been in the position about a year when late one afternoon, I was called into an emergency executive meeting hosted by our chairman of the board of directors. And my first thought was, well, this is odd, especially since the board chair didn't live in Memphis. Then I get into the meeting. I see all my peers, but I don't see our CEO, who was very popular within the organization and among the executive team, and especially with me. Basic message from the board chair: Lawrence is out, and effective immediately, new CEO starts tomorrow morning. Wow. Stunner. I mean, I knew that Lawrence was at times at odds with the board chair, but I had no idea it had risen to the point of removal. So we all just sat in silence. The board chair shared the press release that would be issued the next morning announcing Jay as our new CEO. Well, I immediately began my research on Jay. I wanted to learn as much as I could about his background, experience, accomplishments. And as I got deeper into my research, I was coldly reminded of one of the annoying but undeniable aspects of corporate life. It's not always a meritocracy. As I review Jay's background, I wonder how he even got an interview for this CEO position, much less landing the job. He had spent the majority of his career working for a manufacturing company that provided braking and automation solutions for heavy-duty commercial vehicles. What? No residential experience, no service experience, no retail experience, never been a CEO. How did he get this job? Well, I later learned he had a close relationship with the board chair who basically just handpicked Jay for the job. Oh well, he was now the new company CEO and my new boss. Time to keep an open mind and make the best of it. He's going to have a heck of a learning curve, and given my role, I expected to be a key player in getting him up to speed. Well, it didn't take long for me to realize this is not going to go good. In his first meeting with the executive team, his message was basically, I'm brilliant and great. You guys have badly run this business, but I'm here to fix it all. He then said he wanted to receive input from each of us and hear our thoughts, but then he proceeded to dominate the conversation and really didn't let any of us speak. He ended by informing us he would be scheduling one-on-one meetings with each of us. Oh, goody. To say my first meeting with him did not go well is a gross understatement. He really didn't ask much about me. He really wasn't interested in learning or hearing what I had to say. Now, he did know I had come out of retirement to take this position and that I really wasn't worried about losing my job because I didn't need the job. That does provide a certain degree of ability to speak freely. So Jay started the meeting telling me about his successes and why that meant he would be successful here. And after hearing about 15 minutes of this, I had to interrupt. I said, look, you can't run this company the way you run a manufacturing plant. He's like, yes, I can. I said, no, you can't. He said, yes, I can. And I said, no, you can't. And here's why. You come from a closed industry in which few companies compete. You have professional sellers making pitches to professional buyers. I have housewives eating cereal and drinking vodka, Googling ants. It's not the same thing. And most of your experience doesn't apply. But the executive team and I will do everything we can to help you quickly get up to speed and follow your lead. I thought that would help, but the meeting pretty much went further downhill from there and soon ended. Most of my executive peers assumed Jay and I would clash, and so one of them came by my office to see how my meeting had gone. And I told him, I don't think I'm off to a good start. He's like, why do you say that? I said, because Jay said to me, we're not off to a good start. Well, my dealings with him never got better, but that really didn't matter. He was going to break up the holding company and have each business stand alone. This meant I had to break up my current team and then build a marketing team for each of the businesses. Now, I could have appointed myself CMO of American Home Shield, but I had no interest in continuing with the new regime. But his arrogance with me was just, a personality conflict. What he did to the organization was far worse. I wasn't surprised when he wanted to have an all-new executive team. Sometimes arrogance comes with paranoia, and he wanted an executive team that he knew was totally loyal to him. When he started, there were 10 people on the executive team, and 6 months later, only 2 remained. But here's where he went too far. He also fired most of the director level leaders. These are the subject matter experts. This is the level where things get done. They carry the institutional knowledge and history that's vital to building great plans. But he really believed he could fully replace 3 layers of leadership: the CEO level, executive team, the directors, and then replace them all with outside hires who had no industry experience. And he thought he could do this and still deliver excellence. At that point, I made a prediction. I don't think his total tenure will last 2.5 years. And I was off by 19 days. And here's the thing. There's no doubt he was a smart guy and probably a good businessman. But he totally undervalued the expertise and contributions of others in the organization. He refused to listen to anyone but himself, and he totally demeaned anyone who disagreed with him. The business turned downward, employee morale plummeted, and Jay and his sycophants were soon gone. So how can you avoid behaving arrogantly and being the cause of your own downfall? Well, first, what type of feedback are you receiving from peers and team members? Are people thanking you for including them in discussions? Do people tell you how much they appreciate being heard and given the opportunity to contribute? When you're talking about a team or organizational success, how often do you say we accomplished versus saying what I did? Do you publicly acknowledge others for their contributions? If you're receiving this type of feedback, you're definitely not operating as an arrogant leader or team member. These are the type of leaders people want to work for. But what if you're not hearing this? Well, then, if you really care, then genuinely seek honest feedback from a trusted peer or team member. Just say, you know what? I really want to ensure the team functions well and that I'm doing the best I can to achieve this. Tell me, what are a couple things you think I could do better? The great thing about this approach is you're not leading the witness. You didn't ask, am I being too arrogant? No, instead, you're allowing them to fill in the blanks. Be sure not to get defensive and try to offer explanations if you disagree with what you're hearing. Only ask questions for clarification. Then, after you receive the feedback, give it serious consideration. Be honest with yourself and determine if you need to make some changes. Then, just try to be better. Self-awareness does not usually come easily to arrogant people. But if you've taken the initial step to try to be better, then you're well on the path to improvement and not letting arrogance be your downfall. Let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. I want to tell the story of Hetty Green, who was a pioneering woman financier in the earliest 20th century, at a time when the industry was totally dominated by men. So, Henrietta Hetty Howland Robinson was born in 1834 in Massachusetts. Her mother, Abby Howland, was the daughter of Gideon Howland, the head of the richest whaling family in the city. Her father, Edward, was Gideon's business partner. Okay? At age 2, Hetty was sent to live with her grandfather, Gideon. She had private tutors, and by the age of 6, was reading the daily newspaper, including the financial reports, to her grandfather and father. And then Hetty would accompany her grandfather and father as they ran their successful whaling business. After her grandfather's death, her father ran the company, and Hetty learned the business by listening to him as he increased assets of the business through careful management and wise investments. By the age of 13, Hetty was the family bookkeeper. As she grew into her teens and continued to increase her business knowledge, her mother was much more concerned about grooming Hetty and preparing her for society. The unifying theme throughout this period of Hetty's life was her unapologetic rejection of societal norms established for women at the time, especially wealthy heiresses. Green cared little for her appearance, preferring to dress in old clothes, and she disregarded the daily primping practiced by young women. When she turned 20, she was sent to live with relatives in New York City with the hope of finding a spouse. Well, Hetty attended the lavish balls and she mingled, but she was far more interested in eavesdropping on the men's conversations and learning the dramas of Wall Street. And after a few months, Hetty returned home early without a marriage proposal. Hetty eventually returned to New York and in May 1865 announced her engagement to Edward Green, who was a millionaire in his own right. Soon after, her father and aunt passed away, and then Hetty was outraged to learn that about their wills and estate plans, which left Hetty far less money than she expected to receive. And most of the inheritance was placed in trust. So this resulted in years of lawsuits and court battles, and Hetty eventually gave up, and she and Edward moved to London to live and start a family. Well, upon their return, Hetty was surprised to learn her husband, Edward, had amassed large debts totaling nearly $1 million from the failures of his businesses. She also learned he had planned to cover those losses with Hetty's money without asking her permission for the money. Well, she went on and paid off the debts. And while she never divorced him, she never forgave him either. And their relationship was strange pretty much from that moment on and forever. In 1885, Hetty Green opened an office in the Chemical Bank building in New York and set herself up as a financier. She was arguably the only, but definitely one of the very few female financiers in the entire country. Newspapers came to refer to her as the Witch of Wall Street because of her black clothing and her notorious frugality. And while Hetty would not have referred to herself as a feminist, she did have strong views about women and money. She once said, "It is the duty of every woman, I believe, to learn to take care of her own business affairs. And a girl should be brought up as being able to make her own living. Whether rich or poor, a young woman should know how a bank account works, understand the composition of mortgages and bonds, and know the value of interest and how it accumulates." Hetty was one of the few financiers who predicted the panic of 1907, well, years before it happened. In preparation, Hetty accumulated a large cash position, and when the crash ultimately hit in October of 1907 and people's fortunes began to fall, Hetty was in a position to offer loans to other financiers as they tried to recover. Additionally, the city of New York asked her for a loan, and she wrote a check for $1.1 million, an amount equal to over $37 million today. And then she took her payment in short-term revenue bonds. By this time, her nickname had evolved to the Queen of Wall Street. She was known as Mrs. Hetty Green, and her spouse was referred to as Hetty Green's husband. Hetty developed an intelligent investment strategy for wealth that she could manage directly. She began by contrary investing, meaning buying when stock was low and selling when stock was high. She researched, questioned, read constantly before deciding what to invest in and what to avoid. She invested in railroads, real estate, and government bonds. In 1885, her fortune amounted to $26 million. By the time of her death in 1916, Hetty was the richest woman in the world, with her worth estimated at over $100 million, the equivalent of about $2.5 billion today. Well, that's all I have today for The Ruthless Truth. Thank you so much for listening. Please go to Instagram and follow at TruthDavis5, or you can go to the website truthdavis.com. Let me know what you think. If you have some suggestions of topics you would like for me to cover. And then on social media, there is Facebook, Ruthless Truth, and there's the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. That's it for today, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks.